It's July 22nd today, and we're just getting to my wrap up. So if I don't remember any of these books, that is why. So yeah. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be my June wrap up. So let's just jump right in. So I started off the month of June with the cutest, most amazing graphic novel I have ever read in my entire life. And that is this one right here. This is Dr. Herbert West and Astounding Tales of Medical Malpractice. We did a Nightworms book party with this, and I almost forgot that I read this. I didn't even have it in my pile of read books. I actually had it with the rest of my graphic novels right over here. You could see Sandman here, but this is my graphic novel shelf, and as I opened my Goodreads, I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, I read this. This was such a cute, fun horror graphic novel. Yes, horror. Here we are following a sister and a brother, and the brother is like this doctor, and he's always like inventing things, but things go wrong, and we have a herd of zombies up here. So it's just them trying to get through this and trying to cure and zombies that have a taste for sweets. How perfect is that? The artwork in here is just amazing. The colors is just my vibe, my aesthetics all the way. I highly recommend this. We do have a Nightworms blog post on this. I will link that down below so you can go ahead and see what all the worms thought about this. I ended up giving this one 5 stars. If you get anything out of this pile of books that I am recommending to you, some of them, I would recommend you get this one because it is amazing. I need and want more of this. Next, we're dipping into the world of Brandon Sanderson. I'm so excited to continue my journey with him. I am reading his work in chronological order. So first one being Elantris. I wrapped that up a couple months back, or maybe last month. Yeah, I'm trying to read at least one Brandon Sanderson a month. So last month I read The Final Empire, which is book 1 of the Mistborn trilogy. I mean, I loved it. I love his writing. I love how captivating his writing is from the first. I love his world building, and I love the way he writes his characters. He has badass female characters. He has amazing male characters. This is about a group of people that get together and they're trying to bring down the Lord Ruler. We have an oppressed group of people, also as in Elantris, and they're just trying to bring down the one that reigns it all. He has kept them in misery, in slavery. I love the bond between the characters, and I love how Brandon Sanderson brings characters together and molds them. The dynamic between these group of people, I love from the beginning to the end. I love Kelsier. He is like the leader of this group, and he's the one that's going around trying to bring this group together that's going to bring down this horrible ruler. And then we have Vin, another favorite of mine, and her character development and the way she starts off in the novel is just incredible. She is a slave to this man, but she has powers, and she has powers that she doesn't know how to hone in on. Enter Kelsier when he comes and scouts her and just teaches her everything. I mean, just the friendship in this is amazing. The whole team is just incredible. I loved it so much. I'm ready for book 2. I haven't read book 2 yet. I was set to read it this month, but with the horror in 24, and I haven't been able to sneak it in. So we'll see by the end of July if I'll be able to read it. But I know this is only my 2nd book from Brandon Sanderson, but I'm even more in love with him now than I was when I read Elantris. Of course, I gave this book 5 stars. I don't even know why I had to look to see what rating I gave it. I knew I gave it 5 stars, but I don't know. I wanted to make sure. Next, I read Valentine in the month of June. Duh, this is the June wrap up. This is by Elizabeth Wetmore. This is not my usual type of read, my usual genre, but I saw West Texas, I saw this cover, And when I read the synopsis, I was like, oh my gosh. And thank God that I read this book because it is so amazing. But never ever have I missed the Texas sky more than after reading this book. Her descriptions of the Texas sky are so spot on. This takes place in Odessa, Texas, in a town that is very heavy with oil workers and the oil fields. That's basically all of Texas. One day, this girl shows up at the doorstep of this mother and her 2 kids. Her husband is off working, and she shows up and she's beaten up pretty bad. This girl was raped like a mile or 2 away from her home, and the girl escapes and makes it to this lady's house. I forgot the character names, whatever. And she is there, she sees this girl, she brings her inside, and lo and behold, minutes or an hour later, the guy shows up looking for this girl and trying to make it seem like he didn't do anything to her. So it's this whole case that they are trying to battle. This guy that raped this girl, it comes from a wealthy family. The girl that was raped is Hispanic and this guy is white, so there's race issues going on there, and just the privilege of being white. And poor girl, she's trying to battle this court case against this man that has money and has basically his dad has everybody in his pocket. Mary Rose, which is the lady, which Gloria's the girl that was raped. I should get my name straight. Gloria is the one that shows up at Mary Rose's home after being raped. What Mary Rose goes through because she decides to do the right thing is just incredible. We do follow a couple characters, and we do follow this town as Mary Rose and the neighbors are trying to go through this situation. It was amazing. I loved it. I listened to this on audiobook, and the narrator for Mary Rose just killed it, in my opinion. But again, I did enjoy the Texas setting. It made me miss Texas so much. I ended up giving this book 5 stars, and it's funny because we're gonna go into Animal Crossing now, and you're gonna say, Marcy, how does Animal Crossing play into this book? Okay, so a couple weeks after I read this book, I ended up finding a Switch Lite finally. I think I've said this on my channel like a million times because I'm so happy. I mean, I'm still happy about it. And I ended up naming my island Valentine because I had just had this book still coursing through my system. So every time I see this book now, I think of my island on Animal Crossing. This book is not going to be for everybody. I'm going to tell you that much. I've heard mixed reviews on this. I enjoyed it. I thought it was great. And I just 5 stars. Next, I read the second book in the Splatter Western series, which is Hunger on the Chisholm Trail by M. Ennenbach. I love these books so much. I have already read book 3, and I can say that I loved that one as well. Not as much as book 1, The Magpie Coffin, but they're pretty close. Here we are following different characters as they're trying to make it to this town. They're trying to bring cattle from Texas to Kansas. And so they're trucking along the Chisholm Trail, but there's something evil killing people off during this trail. All these people are trying to make it to the next town of Duncan before they head on completely to Kansas. And so, like I said, there's something evil killing people off, and somehow we make it to Duncan, where certain storylines are developing as well. We follow Carl Beck, and he's like the badass of the story. He's the one that he's like a demon slayer. He's stirring up things in a saloon one day, and he ends up being incarcerated in this town. But lo and behold, thank God that he's there, because evil is coming into the town. The same evil that is on the Chisholm Trail is coming into the town. I mean, I'm not gonna say that I like Carl Beck more than Salem Covington from book 1. But they're pretty close. This is splatter western, so you have gore in this. Gore galore again, as in book 1. My favorite part of this is the gore. I laughed, I enjoyed the characters, and I thought it was a grand old time. I ended up giving this one, of course, 5 stars. So far we started the month off well because we got 4 5-star ratings in a row. I was a happy camper at the beginning of the month reading all these books. Next, I jumped into Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. I love Ruth Ware. I love her thrillers. I think they are fast-paced. They are gripping. The endings can leave much to be desired, but either way, I still love her. I think my favorite book so far, I think, is The Woman in Cabin 10. I just enjoyed that book. But here we follow a nanny, or a woman, and she is sent a letter with this job possibility of nannying or taking care of this home with the children of this like rich family. And when she gets there, this house is like very high tech. Everything is dealt with a tablet or a phone. Everything is electronic and digital, and she's not very well versed in this world of technology. But there's something weird going on. There's weird stories behind this like garden, and some deaths that happen in the family. The girls act funny, and there's just this whole mystery that she's trying to unleash while she's being attacked at the same time. I feel like this was very dark in tone and very eerie at times. I believe, no, I'm reading it right now. I put that this is my favorite Ruth Ware novel, but I don't think so. I think it's The Woman in Cabin 10 now that I've had time to digest this book fully. I felt like the ending was a little bit rushed in this novel, but it's one of her best endings that I have read so far. So that's a good thing. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. Now we're gonna get into my most disappointed read of this first half of the year. I talk about it in my mid-year book freakout tag, and that's The Whisper Man. I mean, this book was okay. It wasn't horrible, but I was just expecting something a little darker from what I was hearing people talk about, that this was like horror-y in a sense. I did listen to this on audiobook, so I think that dampened my reading experience a little bit. But either way, I liked it. This has to do with a man that stands outside the windows of children and whisper. That's how the book starts off. But this man ultimately is captured, but many years later, things start happening again as far as whispering and kids being abducted. And it's just them trying to figure out how this man sort of is attached to the first man that had abducted and killed kids with the whisper. Like I said, I was left a little bit disappointed. One of my complaints was from the audiobook that the narrator made everything, every character the same, like the same monotone kind of tone, where I can understand giving the main character, which is Tom, that kind of undertone or that tone in the voice, because Tom was he was like a very like underwhelming character, so I can see it, but that the narrator kept it consistently around to every other character, almost trying to bring the tone of the book into each character. It just didn't work for me. I was underwhelmed with the story. So I say all of this, and I still gave this book 3 stars because I liked the premise and I liked the storyline. I just felt that the narrator's execution just wasn't that great, and it dampened my enjoyment of the novel. Either way, I ended up giving this book 3 stars. I mean, I still recommend it. It was still a good book. I wish I would have read it physically. I think I would have had a better time with the book. The next book I read, I don't even want to talk about. I have found a way to push it out of my brain. You know, when you hear something disturbing or see something disturbing all through your life, it ends up like popping up in your head at the most weirdest times, and it sort of like dampers your mood. Well, I've sort of found a way to push this book out of my mind, thankfully, but just the mere fact that I have to sit here and talk about it now. That is Dead Inside by Chandler Morrison. This was brought upon in a chat room in the Nightworms. Somebody had said something about it and was like, what did I just read? It's super disturbing. And we were all like, oh, what? A lot of the people rated this book 5 stars. I feel weird rating this book. I did rate it. I will give you my rating after I've just finished ranting about it. But a lot of people liked it and gave it 5 stars, and I'm just over here trying to like cleanse myself after reading it. I have never read anything more disturbing in my life. It is weird. It is gross. Like gross. I don't get grossed out, but this is gross. I like the underlying tones of being different, of being an outcast that the story has, but still, it was just a bit much. I know I've said this before when I talk about splatter westerns, but this is not for the faint of heart. I mean, it even says it in the synopsis. This is not for the faint of heart. We have a security guard that works at a hospital, and I'm just grabbing from the synopsis because I don't want to say too much. It is a fairly short book. And he has an unusual taste in women, and then we have a maternity doctor that has an unusual taste, period. And these two people meet and they just go on a journey together, which is just... this is one of those books that I wish I could unsee. I gave this book 3 stars because you have to have an imagination to come up with the that I read here. I mean, this was just, it is disturbing AF. So we have a lot of death, trigger warnings for death, for baby deaths, for, let's just put a trigger warning for everything in this book, okay? You've been warned, please. If you're sensitive to a lot of things, I would stay away from this, but it was an interesting read, to say the least. One thing I do want to add though, I do want to read more from this author because I love how, regardless of what I was reading, I was gripped into the story because of Chandler's writing. His writing is phenomenal. I don't know if all his books are this kind of disturbing. I haven't looked very much into the author or his other works, so I don't know, but his writing is, and that's why I gave this book 3 stars, because at times I wanted to stop reading, but I couldn't because he invites you into the story, which I thought was great. Then I read the June Booktubers and Brews book for the month that is hosted by Jacqueline. I will link the live video. We already had the live discussion. I will link it down below. But we read Suffer the Children. I was a guest panelist, a guest reader, a guest host. I was a guest host for the month, and this is the book that we chose, Suffer the Children. I've had this sitting here forever, and I was so glad she picked this, that Jackie picked this book to read, because I loved it so much. Here we are following a town. Oh, it's by Craig DeLuey. Here we are following this town, and all of a sudden the kids just die. All of them. They're dead. 3 days later, they start waking up. What? Yeah, it's crazy. Some of them, because there's so many kids around the world. I mean, it's not just this town. It's around the world. Like, all the kids are dying. All the kids are dead. And imagine the complexity of this, the grandeur of this, how we just have to start burying all these kids. I have a hard time saying burying. And some of them have to be like mass graves. They can't get to all of them, so some of them are still laying there. Some of them are still in the morgue, but whatever. 3 days later, they start getting up, and you guessed it. I mean, there's some of them that are still buried, so we gotta unbury all these kids. But they have an unusual need for blood. So almost like they come to life and they're alive, and then they almost go into a comatose state where their bodies are needing blood. I thought this was amazing. It was so good, but I wish that we would have gotten more of the ending throughout the whole book, because I thought that was the best part. The way it ended, I was like, oh, if we would have had more of this throughout the book, it would have been a 5-star read. I'm not going to talk too much about it other than what I just said. I will link the live show down below so you can see what we all thought about it, and you could get different perspectives from it. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. The last and final book that I read for the month was Beatride by Emily Henry. This is the second book that I read from Emily Henry. I always want to say Hendry. Even with that last book that I read, with the other book last year, I want to say Emily Hendry. I don't know why. My mouth just forms to Hendry. I'm sorry. And that was... I forgot. I think When the Sky Fell from... That book. I loved that book. I want to reread it. But Beatride is a whole different ballpark. This is like a romantic kind of it's a beachy read. Let's leave the romance out of it. It's a beachy read. I loved this. I remember finishing this book. Am I in focus? I remember finishing this book right like a couple hours before I filmed my mid-year book freakout tag, and I just wanted to use this book for every question in the tag. I loved this. It was so fun. I think I chose this for the book that made me happy for that tag. We follow January and we follow, I forgot his name, and we follow Augustus. January has writer's block. She ends up moving to this beach town where her dad left her a beach house, and she's finding out a lot of secrets from her family. She's trying to process the death of her dad, all these secrets, and that he left her this beach house that she knew nothing of. And so she has to go and clean out the house, and she has this neighbor, Augustus, and he's going through writer's block as well. Well, they end up meeting and they end up coming up with a deal where she, obviously there's a bunch of things that happen in between, but they end up coming up with a deal where she has to write the kind of books that he writes and he has to write the kind of books she writes. So romance for her, or romance for him, and we're doing the swap, and she has to write more of a true crime, darker kind of tale. There's laughs, there's cries. This is just a well fleshed out book where it's just not about the romance, it's about family lies or family secrets and hurt. I loved it. I ended up giving this one 5 stars. It's the perfect summer read. It's the perfect beach or poolside read, and it was amazing. So 5 stars. I'm just kidding. That wasn't the last book I read. Wow. The official last book I read for the month is What Lies Between Us by John Mars. I finally read a John Mars book. My bookstee Eleni, that is her favorite author, and she's been hounding me to finally read one of his books, and I buddy read it with my friend Tali because she hadn't read John Mars either. And this was a whirlwind of a book. Here we follow Maggie and Nina, and they are just crazy. One did something to the other that the other one can't forgive. The other one is doing something to the other that they can't forgive. One is being kept captive. But it is just crazy. Not going to go too much into it because I don't want to spoil the little details, and reading the synopsis, they don't give a lot other than what I just said. Just go into this knowing that it is a fucked up relationship. It is effed up to the max. Reading this, I was just, every time I would read something, I'm like, oh my gosh, what? I ended up giving this book 4 stars. I liked his writing. It was fast-paced. I was going through something at the time that I started this book, so I think that it played a good distraction in what I was going through. It was very well executed. His writing is amazing, and little things kept coming up, and little like twists and turns just throughout the whole novel. It was a quick read, fast-paced, even with the stops that I had to make for mental issues going through what we were going through. 4 stars. Had a great time. I don't know why I keep doing this with my hands, but there you go. So that's it, you guys. Those are all the books that I read for the month of June. I'm so happy to have finally filmed this video because I kept looking at my pile saying, Marcella, you're not gonna remember anything to talk about these books. Yeah, I don't know what else to say other than let me know down below what you read for the month of June, which one was your favorite book, what you recommend I pick up that you just absolutely love. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys in my next video. Bye! We are going to be talking about all the books that I read for the book. I have something in my eye that's not letting me see. Is it a piece of eyelash? So here we follow... What?